Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and let's take a moment to meet the X Club. Yeah! All right, guys, have fun. All right, so picking up where we left off, we met the Keymaster, Joseph Norman Lockyer, publisher of Nature magazine, who seems hell-bent on making sure that every man, woman, and child in the Empire learns the new sciences that he and his stable, the X Club, are cooking up with their Unity in Nature. Nature magazine, of course, providing the mouthpiece for the multidisciplined new natural philosophies they change the realm with. Now, there's a lot to unpack with the X Club. There are 9 of these guys. But to quickly demonstrate just how multidisciplinary this group was, starting with their fearless leader, Thomas Henry Huxley, we have biology and anthropology represented. Right next on the list, we have George Busk, who was a surgeon, zoologist, and paleontologist, and the life of every party. Can you imagine a more sad-looking individual? He must have really hated having this picture taken. So next on the list, we have Sir Edward Frankland, and he was a chemist and one of the originators of organometallic chemistry. And he introduces the concept of combining power of valence. Now that seems pretty important to me, right? And concept is a very interesting word here. All right, so next we have Thomas Archer Hurst, who was a mathematician specializing in geometry, right? And he was awarded the Royal Society's Royal Medal in 1883. That's how well he knows his way around an angle. Next, why, it's Sir Joseph Dalton Hooker, who was a botanist and explorer and Chucky Darwin's best mate. You think he lives up to this surname, Hooker? Because they're just a bunch of whores. The lot of them, right? Joseph, he who increases the hookers. So next, it's John Boy, the Right Honorable Lord Avebury. Banker, liberal politician, philanthropist, scientist, polymath. A man so important to Mud City, I'm giving him 2 slides here because not only did he work for his family's bank, I'm sure investing their money in all these new sciences he's helping to create. Sciences like archaeology. Next, Next we have Herbert Spencer. Now he's the only one that I could not associate as a fellow of the Royal Society. And I'm almost certain that he was, and I just haven't been able to find that connection yet. But this is where we get the social and psychological component in the X Club. And he coins the phrase survival of the fittest. That's pretty amazing, right? Because I'm sure most would attribute that to Darwin. I know I would have before this. Next, here comes the president, William Spottiswoode, another mathematician who adds physics and publishing to his resume.
How convenient!
And last, but certainly not least, we have Johnny Tyndall, physicist who works with magnetism and radiation, and it's him that proves the connection between atmospheric carbon dioxide and what is now known as the greenhouse effect. And just think about how big a part this is playing in the modern mainstream narrative right now. John Kerry is asking for trillions of dollars in taxpayers' loans over the next 30 years to battle climate change. Not John Kerry the Bonesman. He's the one asking for all these loans. And could this whole climate change agenda be part of their plan all along? I don't know, but these guys had their hands in everything. And if there was something that they didn't have their hands in, they knew someone who did. Because as I said, all but one of these men were fellows of the Royal Society, and 3 of them served as president. The members of the X Club and other clubs and societies like them formed a very powerful cabal that shaped scientific thought for at least 100 years. Because I found this book on the X Club, and this is a recent book published in 2018. And so the author says that the formal club met for dinner from 1864 to 1892, but informally, the club had a life of almost 40 years. For at least 5 years before 1864, subgroups of the Friends had engaged in coordinated action. The club was, as James Moore claims, the most powerful coterie in late Victorian science. Although I, the author, would date that power earlier, from the late 1860s to the early 1880s. And I am going to date that power even earlier than that, going back, I think, probably to the 1820s, if not earlier. We'll see as we get going down the line. But the members of the X Club held institutional power within science and were given philosophical and scientific authority by a wide public. Organizationally, the most remarkable example of mutual power is the 5 years in the mid-1870s when Hooker was president, Spottiswoode treasurer, and Huxley the biological secretary of the Royal Society, and the subsequent succession of Spottiswoode and Huxley to the presidency, making a continuous 12-year reign by the X Club. 12 years of running the whole shebang out of the Royal Society, the X Club, who with the help of their silent member and pimp, the Keymaster, Joseph Norman Lockyer, and his benefactor, Alexander Macmillan, they were going to make sure that it was their new sciences that dictated the future, because they have an empire to expand. And according to the Keymaster, things are going swimmingly in satellite empire branches like America and Prussia. Because let's not forget that over in America, they had Alexander Dallas Backy and the Scientific Lazzaroni in play. The Scientific Lazzaroni, one-upping their British counterparts by having 10 members, right? And Alexander Dallas Backy was the light of the American scientific community. And the influence of his Lazzaronis extended to all of the sciences and included much of the research performed in universities and the government. Think about that for a minute, right? Because they were also, thank you, consciously promoting the development of a professional scientific community. And it's unfortunate this series got cut off so prematurely. I didn't get to dive deep into the Lazzaroni, but what they wanted to do was they wanted to emulate the autocratic academic structures of European universities. You know, those universities founded and run by the church. And they liked the university setup so much that they only wanted university-educated scientists as members to create a pure science for America. Because the universities were the only reliable source for education, according to the Right Honorable Viscount Haldane. And what does it mean that they wanted to create a pure science? Science, by its very definition, is pure. All right, science, broken down, sci is Latin for to know, right? And the suffix ence makes it an action, right? So it's the act of knowing. And science is a methodology. The only thing that can be pure or unpure about science is the way that you use what you know. And the Scientific Lazzaroni use what they know to be bullies, right? Scientists who do not match the code and oath of the initial members would be forced, if possible, out of their vocation and not allowed to advance. They had to swear an oath to the Lazzaroni, presumably an oath of allegiance, and if they didn't, they would be fired and blacklisted. Is this the origin of scientism? It's hard to look at it any other way when they use their influence to discredit independent scientists. Was this a trick borrowed from the UK Royal Societies? Because let's not forget that Daly was a fellow of both. So he's in on the expanding of the empire too. And with his pioneering work on magnetism and the weather, coupled with Johnny Tyndall's greenhouse effect, my apophenia is telling me that there could be something to the idea that this has been in the works for a very, very long time. These were very smart guys, and there's no telling how far-sighted they were, especially if they're writing the programs. And about 3 years after Daly becomes a fellow, he and his good buddy Honest Abe start the National Academy of Science on March 3rd, 33, in 1863. And so now, is this proof of complicity between the two groups as they conspire to change the world? I don't know. It could be. And I have a big task ahead of me sorting out the X Club. The Lazzaronis are going to have to wait. But the work that I did complete on Daly is all out there, right? Starting with the ties that bind, which may serve as a good primer for what's to come. I know I need to go back and watch all of these before we dive into the deep end of the X Club, because depending on how deep I go, the potential for this story to get crazy is most certainly there. Evolution, flat earth, the murder of God, it's all here. So before I dig in, I just want to take a moment to remind everyone that I am not a truther. Right? This is not a truth channel, and what I'm doing is building a false paradigm that I call Mud City. And Mud City is a place where the history that mainstream academia presents to us is used to support just about every conspiracy under the sun. And for lack of a better metaphor, I like to think of Mud City as a shadow of our presented reality. A shadow that grows from the city of Baltimore. Any resemblance or correlation to current events is merely a coincidence and a product of your own apophenia.
Know what I mean? Know what I mean? Nuts, know what I mean? Say no more.
Alright, so this has just been a quick preamble for what's to come. It might be a couple of weeks before I get the next one up, so remember guys, just because you don't know the truth doesn't mean you can't have fun with the lies, right? So until then, cheers.